Hey everyone, it's Matt Larosiere from Firearms Policy Coalition bringing you a weekly update, just to make sure that you have the latest information on everything that's happened affecting your right to keep and bear arms. It's been an interesting week. First off, we've got the ATF reclassifying the Franklin Armory Reformation. For those of you who don't know, the Reformation is an AR-15 type firearm with a short barrel and a buttstock. But it's not a short-barreled rifle because it doesn't have rifling. They cut a series of straight grooves into it. It's actually pretty interesting. And for a long time, this has been sold as a normal firearm. You know, no tax stamps, nothing special like that. Until this week, when the ATF decided to change course and create a whole new classification just for it. So it's not a shotgun or a SBR under the National Firearms Act, but the ATF says it's a shotgun under the Gun Control Act. So it's a shotgun, but not a shotgun. And also that they don't have a mechanism for owning and transferring these, so they're not banning them, but if you own one, you can't sell it and you can't take it out of the state until the ATF decides how to handle this. This is just another example of an administrative agency trying to grab power when it was never granted it in the first place. This was not in the law. The law is clear, and Franklin Armory followed the law to the letter. This is ridiculous. I'm sure those of you who've owned bump stocks and have gone through the trouble of whether you can shoulder the brace are familiar with this type of stuff. This is just another example, and it's another reason why the Supreme Court needs to step in and set these administrative agencies straight. They are not able to write new laws. The Constitution does not allow for that. Second up, we've got Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro deciding to go after 80% firearms, or ghost guns as he calls them. Now remember, 80% firearms is not something that's actually federally defined. A 80% firearm is a marketing term for something that is not a firearm. It's a hunk of metal. It has no legal significance whatsoever in most of the country. Shapiro decided to interpret Pennsylvania law to declare that a 80% firearm was readily convertible to expel a projectile. And that language, by the way, in Pennsylvania law was designed for starter pistols where a plug could just be driven out and then the thing turns into a firearm. That said, this is ridiculous. It's not a firearm, and there's no mechanism to regulate everything that's not a firearm, right? Where do you put the serial number on your shovel that could be bent into an AK-47 or this spool of 3D printer filament that could become whatever, right? This is just silly, and that's actually why FTC, as we'll talk more later, tried to stop this. We filed a preliminary injunction this week to prevent the Attorney General from writing his own laws and creating a whole new class of criminal. That said, I mean, I might want to comply just in case. You never know what this could become. No, I don't. I'm not going to PA soon anyway. Up third, Puerto Rico takes a first step towards recognizing gun rights. Puerto Rico passed Act 168, which completely revamps Puerto Rican code. Previously, to own a firearm at all in Puerto Rico, you had to basically prove need and go through all this long process, very expensive, then you couldn't carry. On top of that was another process, you know, if you wanted to be able to actually carry and use your firearm. 168, what it does is creates a shall issue system, and the same permit for ownership allows you to carry and defend yourself with your firearm, and it also recognizes carry permits from the United States. All that said, this is really just a baby step. Puerto Rico, you have an opportunity to say, we recognize that this is a right of the people to keep and bear arms, and what we were doing were wrong, and to just fix it. How is it a right if you have to pay a fee every 5 years and go through all these hoops to exercise it? If you want to recognize that it's a right, I mean, sure, good first step, but treat it that way. You gotta go all the way. It's a human right. Humans don't have to pay to use their rights. You have to remember that. Fourth, New York Governor Cuomo wants stricter gun control. I'm sure that's a huge surprise to you guys. Basically, what Cuomo is saying is that under New York law, there is a set of serious misdemeanors that means that you can't get a firearm permit in the state. He considers it a problem that if you are convicted of one of these misdemeanors in another state and then move in to the state of New York, you could still possibly get a firearm, get your permit approved. So he wants to fix this. This is really horrible. Misdemeanors are not supposed to be the type of crimes that you lose your rights permanently over. It's just not. You get less serious treatment by the judge, the prosecutors, you get less rights at trial, and you're often encouraged to just plea out to it because the general belief is that there's not very high risks. So especially if you're in another state and you're convicted of a misdemeanor that you weren't thinking would be that big of a deal, you move to New York and you have no right to control your bodily autonomy, to keep and bear arms, that's a serious problem. And also, just for those of you who might be swayed by the serious misdemeanor language, one of those misdemeanors is owning a firearm that isn't registered. Okay, how's that for circular? Up fifth, St. Louis banned carrying firearms in their parks. This is kind of interesting in that it's one instance where there is actually a loophole being used here. So Missouri recently passed constitutional carry where all adults can carry firearms, responsibly, as they should be able to. There are some exceptions in the law. We can debate the merits of those exceptions. I'm not here to do that. But that said, one of the exceptions is child care facilities, which the law describes basically as things like daycare. So what St. Louis did is they just decreed that all of their parks and everything connected to them are child care facilities. City parks. Hilarious. And last up, we've got our FPC litigation update. As you guys know, we are really passionate about your rights, and so we really like to sue people who violate them. This week we've been pretty busy. We filed a brief in Guedes, which is the bumpstock ban case, where we are arguing for our case to be heard at the Supreme Court. This is important, and this relates to everything that we've been talking about the administrative states, about things like the bumpstock ban, the pistol brace rulings, the Reformation that we just talked about. It all comes down to these issues. So that's really important. Definitely check that out in the legal section of our website. In addition to that, we filed an injunction in Linton v. Becerra. Now, to explain Linton v. Becerra, imagine you live in any state in the US, you commit a felony, all right? You get convicted, but then you go through all the process in that state to have your record wiped clean, to be forgiven, have your rights restored. Now you're in California, and they don't recognize that. Your rights are permanently gone if you've committed a nonviolent felony outside the state, even though you've gotten your rights restored. And with the amount of nonviolent felonies on the books, this is completely unacceptable. Things like somebody who caught a lobster too small or was in possession of drugs in a state where they're not allowed yet shouldn't eliminate your right to control your bodily autonomy for the rest of your life. And that's why we're trying to stop the state from continuing to harm people in this way. And last up, we've got, as we talked about, we filed that injunction against the state of Pennsylvania from enforcing this brand new made up ghost gun 80% spooky thing that they're doing. Give that a read. It's really interesting stuff, especially if you want to get frustrated about abuses of governmental power. Until then, guys, keep your eyes on firearmspolicy.org, where we've been keeping up the fight for all of your rights all the time. I've been Matt Larosiere, and I'll see you real soon.